This is a video about the ancestors and why it is of the utmost importance to honor your ancestors. Ancestor worship or veneration used to be a part of nearly every pre-Christian or pre-Abrahamic belief system because they knew that when you honor your ancestors, you are honoring a part of yourself. We are simply a composite of all of our ancestors. Now, if you're pagan, you will know that the kind of window that the ancestors are said to be able to come into our world was on Saturday, it was on the lunar eclipse. And for me personally, because my ancestry is mostly Scottish and Gaelic, uh, I follow this tradition called Samhain. And on Samhain, it was traditional to leave offerings of food out for your ancestors and remember them and tell stories and even update them on the events that had happened that year. So, me and my partner did a ritual at the exact moment of the lunar eclipse. And we made our sacred space. We had already bought some food specifically for the ancestors, and we lit some incense and candles, and it was a very strong atmosphere. So we turned the lights off, and there were candles on the table or the altar that we had made for our ancestors. And there was a lot of movement. There was a lot of movement in that room. My cat was staring very intensely at the table that we had laid for them. So we said all of the names that we could remember. I mean, you're not going to know even a tiny fragment of all of the names that your ancestors were known by. But the ones that we did remember, grandmothers, great grandmothers, and other family members that had passed on, we said their names, but we asked for all of our ancestors in both of our maternal and paternal lines to come through and to, if they wanted, accept the gifts that we had left for them. So we left apple pie, beer, incense, candlelight. We even left some cigarettes for the smokers in the family. You know, they're not going to change personalities just because they're dead. They're still going to be the same character that they were when they were alive. And we did that. And I also left some offerings for Odin because Odin is a god of the dead. And it's important to remember that we don't know exactly what they did in those rituals. We only have tiny fragments of that knowledge left because of Christianity. But it always made sense to me to honor Odin on that day and ask him to help with the ritual. So one of the things that I asked Odin to do was to, if any of our ancestors had not passed on properly, if there were like fragments left, from the trauma and the experiences that they had had when they were alive. And I'm a firm believer that in the West we are not doing the right burial rites. Uh, if you look at what the Hindus do, their rites, death rites are very elaborate. But in the West, it's kind of your ancestor or the dead person goes into the ground and, there's this prayer to a foreign god. And it simply does not sit well with me that that's kind of all that we do. But I think that the lack of funeral rights has an impact. I do, and there are a lot of ghosts around that they shouldn't be here, quite simply. And I do think it is a consequence of the lack of the correct rituals. So anyway, I did ask Odin, please, if any of them are stuck or there's some fragments left here where they shouldn't be, please can you take them into the right realm? So we did all of that and then we sat down and we were meditating for a while and I can see I guess in the clairvoyant sense, I don't normally talk about these experiences because they're private, but I'm willing to share this one because I think it's important uh, for everyone to know. But we sat down to meditate, and all of a sudden, I did see one of my ancestors. Now, it wasn't someone that I knew of because he looked like he was from maybe, I don't know, like it's hard to say, but maybe the 1600s. And the funny thing is that he looked a lot like my father, and he was wearing a military uniform. I come from a military family, but it was very old fashioned. It was like blue, and he had these kind of white, like almost like white joggers on. I don't know exactly where. He seemed to be English. I have that in my ancestry as well, being from the British Isles. So he was very jolly. And like I say, he looked like my father. He had the same body shape and all of that. And he seemed to have the same character that my grandfather had. Sorry, my father has, and my grandfather actually. But he accepted I saw him drinking the beer that we had left. And yeah, it was nice to actually see, one of the ancestors. But like I said, I could see a lot of movement in the kitchen. My cat knew that there was something going on because he was just kind of frozen and watching everything. And yeah, then I saw something really profound, and I knew that I had to share this with you. But this was just a vision, tapping into this. And I believe that a lot of people would be able to do this if they knew how. But I saw this image of Odin, and he appeared as a pretty old man. He kind of looks different sometimes depending on the ritual or the circumstances. But I saw him standing there, and I saw these two streams of spirits. And it was like a stream, like a water, but I could see that they were human spirits. And they went towards him, and it was like they were going through this portal. And I knew then that what I had asked him to do, and, kind of the intention of the ritual, it was something to do with that, and that these people were moving on into some other realm. And I just got a really good feeling from it. But that whole ritual, of course, because it was on the eclipse, it was so atmospheric. It was so still, and it was so quiet, even outside. It was eerily quiet. It was like 9:30 p.m. and there was not a sound. And it felt very profound to me. I also saw some other interesting things, and I'm not quite sure what the relevance of this part is, but I heard horses, like a herd of horses, and they were neighing, and I could hear their hooves pounding on the ground, and I'm not quite sure what that meant or what the relevance was. But it's really important that we all, and regardless of what tradition you follow, it's important that we all start doing this again. And I even know pagans that don't do this. You know, your ancestors, you must remember them, you must honor them. Giving offerings was always part of this, and it was universal until we had this Abrahamic takeover where suddenly your ancestors don't matter anymore. The only thing that matters is that you believe in this God, or but I believe that almost everyone has we're kind of riddled with ancestral wounds and trauma. And well, really the only way to fix this is through this kind of uh, ancestor veneration. And really, it is creating a channel of communication with them. Now, the ancestors are not said to be able to come in willy-nilly whenever they want to. I believe that the only window really is on this day of, of Samhain. And if you look at Western astrology, this is when Scorpio season starts and Scorpio rules the dead. So it's perfectly aligned with that. But it's really something to think about. And I think that the consequences of not acknowledging our ancestors have been very severe. And there are a lot of people with, they have this thing that happens over and over again in their line. It's like this loop of trauma or the family curse or wound. And I think this is part of it. This is this huge important thing that we should all be doing every year, and most people do not do anything. We're missing out on something. And I think a lot of the stuff horrible things that we are seeing in the world, this ripple effect, and one of the reasons why it is such a bad time to be alive. There's a lot of good stuff as well, in particular now, because we can practice, depending on which country you're from, we are able to practice this type of thing without getting thrown into prison or burnt. But it's something that we all need to look at. There are terrible people out there, and they will tell you, your ancestors they were terrible, terrible people. You should be ashamed of them. And it is an awful form of black magic. To be ashamed of your ancestors is basically you're putting a death curse on yourself because you're completely made up of your ancestors. And if you hate them, if you think they were bad, it's a form of, self-destruction. And of course, we will have ancestors that were amazing, some that weren't so great, everything in between. And I think that that's kind of universal depending on where you're from. But we all need to do this and bring this back. And we owe it to them to remember them and to acknowledge that they are still a part of us today. And there's this terrible thing, within New Age, the New Age in particular, they will pretty much acknowledge anything except for their own ancestors and except for their own ancestral gods. The whole alien thing, which is total subversion, and space cats and all kinds of nonsense, when in fact the only power, the real path, is an ancestral path. And stuff like spirit guides is all, that's also ancestral in certain traditions. Like in Ireland it was the fetch, and it was a spirit guide that was ancestral. It was inherited by people in that line. It wasn't some random entity like the New Agers think now. Oh, I'm white Irish, but my spirit guide is this Native American chief. I mean, that's total nonsense. It's ancestral. The same goes for a spirit animal. They belong to a family, a bloodline of people. It's not going to be different for all of these, different members of a family. There has been so much subversion there. And I just think that it's something that we all need to understand. And we need to make this a part of our tradition once again in the proper way, which is through ritual, through offerings. Offerings were always such a big part of paganism, but even before that, it is about give and take. It's not just about take. It's not about praying into the air and asking for things without giving. And offerings is a way that we can make an energy exchange so that we can both receive something. So just my thoughts. I thought that I would share, and you can let me know in the comments what you did. If you celebrated anything, if you venerated your ancestors, because I've been going on about this for weeks now, but I just think it's important. Thanks for watching.